On the picture is me doing that face. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the I Am 1-2 podcast with Christopher Cohn, your host. And as with me always is my co-pilot, producer, and best friend in recovery, Dan the Man. Hello, Dan.
Hope everybody's doing good out there. Hello, everyone.
Hello. So, if you're first time visiting this podcast, this is an all things recovery podcast. We start out talking about addicts and alcoholics, but we're going to address every type of addiction, every type of affliction, all the crazy stuff that's going on in our world today, and hopefully create a safe haven here where you can sort of slip in and hear some good tools. We have this amazing resource that we always sit back and we're like, I don't know how the rest of the world does it. We kind of do because the rest of the world is drinking, drugging, oversexing, overeating, and doing all this other stuff. But we have this place we can go to every week where I can get solutions to my problems for free. I don't have to pay for a therapist. Maybe I'll put $1 in the hat when it goes by, but I get real world experience. I don't get things out of a book. I don't get theory. I don't get somebody with a degree telling me what they think I should do because they heard that in class, but they don't have direct experience. I get direct experience from people who have been there and done it, and they said, this didn't work, but do it this way. It worked much better. And my life goes great. So that's what we want this podcast to be, a resource for people who don't get to go to meetings, although we will be opening up opportunities for you to go to meetings because we want the normal people to have this program too of the 12 steps. But it's a beautiful way to live. And like I said, it used to be in the old days, you go and live in a tribe, you had elders, you could ask for guidance and to help you deal with life and learn how to do things right to the best way. And we've lost that as a society. We shove a tablet in our kids' heads and say, figure it out. Mm-hmm. I never got the sex talk, to be honest with you. Even way back in the day, I had to just figure it out from my dad's Playboys, you know. It's just sad what we're doing with kids nowadays. All right, having said that, so welcome. We are glad you're here. The podcast is formatted in 3 parts. We'll have an education portion at the beginning where I'll talk about a topic, and we have a killer double entendre topic for you today. And then we'll have a question or a discussion period with me and Dan after that. And then after that, we will take your questions. And we want you to know that you can write in questions about anything going on in your life. And I will address it, and we will not identify you. It's completely anonymous. So send your questions on anything you're struggling with to IAM12 recovery at gmail.com. That's IAM12, the word recovery, at gmail.com. I didn't mention this in the last episode, but if you're just joining us, I am a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor, highest credentialing you can get in the state of Kentucky in that field. I have a master's of science in social work with a specialization in addiction studies. But I think most importantly, I've walked this journey of being an addict and alcoholic myself, who almost died from it many times, put my family through hell. And then now I'm celebrating 40 years of recovery just a couple of weeks ago. So I don't know if you'll find that combination in too many places of somebody who has so much experience. And I've been working professionally in the field for over 21 years. So that's what you're going to get for free here. And as I always say, I'm not here as a professional therapist as much as I'm here as a fellow sufferer. And any suggestions I offer you on any problems you write in, I will address that from my experience, strength, and hope rather than playing therapist here. All righty. So, before we get to it, we're heading into Memorial Day weekend, and then the weekend after that, my good friend Dan is having his annual retreat at his cabin. And if you are lucky enough to join a group, and if you are lucky that it's an all-male or all-female group, and if you are lucky on top of that, that they mention that once a year they go on retreat, please do yourself that favor and do it. It will be one of the greatest experiences you've ever had in your life. It will be something you will remember on your deathbed. So why don't you tell the folks, Dan, in general, what is a retreat and what kind of happens on this thing called a retreat?
Yeah, well, first off, I am not a professional retreat person, but it turns out that I've been playing that
pretty
role
damn good at it,
every once in a year, you know, and the way, you know, I just fell into it like everything else that's happened to me in recovery. I never planned to be doing that, but my home group was having a day-long retreat at a park nearby, and my probation officer wouldn't let me go to that county. And they come home and not really complain, but there was some talking about the fact of the lack of privacy at the place. And I happen to have a place that's plenty private, so I offered it up. And the next year I was I think I was someplace in the neighborhood, someplace around 15 months sober, and held my first men's retreat with the help of friends. But we just get together. This year will be the 10th one.
That's awesome.
At our retreat, we really just, I do make it ceremonial. I do things. I have an opening ceremony, and we do some stuff to, what I learned from the Mankind Project is to create this safe and tight container that everybody can feel safe in the weekend to talk about and do what they want to do. But really, we just get together and cook meat over open fire. We have meetings. We talk. We go fellowship around. People get to know each other. We talked about before, there's nothing more powerful than friends in recovery, the buddies, your tribe. That creates a cohesion in that tribe of people that really feel like they know each other. They come together in support of one another.
Because you're outside your normal environment.
Right.
In any situation where humans are stressed, even if it's just an uncomfortable new environment, causes bonding.
Yep.
When I'm away from my group for a day or two because I'm off, that will even help my patients bond because they have a new therapist that they don't quite like.
Yep. And every year, well, the guys that have been coming for a long time talk about how great a time they had. But really, the thing that really touches me is when the new guys come, and that's like, so I can tell you easy, a dozen guys that talked about that coming to the retreat was like when the bell went off. There was like, oh man, hold on, this is really something I do want to be a part of. And I can be a part of it.
Yeah.
Had one guy I had met him 4 days before the retreat and invited him to come. And I'll be damned if he didn't come. And some weird things happened because he got lost on the way there. And, there's no cell service at my cabin, but I looked down and my phone was ringing and it was this guy. And, so I run up in the 4-wheeler up to the top of the hill where I could get some service, and I caught him. And I was able to guide him the rest of the way in from there. Just some really cool stuff happens that can't be explained, kind of like that in itself. I had another guy that's been trying to get sober for a long time, and he just stays in my periphery. He refuses to come and be in, but somehow or another he will text, and his text will get in on retreat weekend. He picks it, and he don't know what's happening. But he'll, how is it that God is calling you, boy?
I know, but he's missing it, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's missing it. But it is just a blast, and
it does,
time after time, people talk about how much it means to the recovery.
In our culture, men don't get a chance to bond unless it's over something that's usually not healthy. It's messing with women, or you shouldn't be messing with, or it's going to a bar and drinking or drugging.
Yeah, it's usually some kind of drinking activity, playing golf.
Yeah, that's our comradeship nowadays,
even guys that are hunting and drinking and hunting.
Right, but whereas in the past it was hunting for food, and we had a common bond that we died if we didn't get something.
Yeah.
I saw this tribe on a documentary the other day, and they were hunting this deer and then this gazelle and then this boar they had in the bushes, and it got away. And the guy was like, they ain't stopping because they cannot come back to camp without food. They've got to keep going. And they eventually found this cheetah that they wore down. Yeah. And it was amazing how they worked together, and that's that bond. I remember my first retreat in Minnesota, though. And when I talk memories on your deathbed, literally it sounds silly, but if you had been there and felt it, you too would have remembered it for the rest of your life. We're around the fire. Some people had gone to bed. The people that gone to bed missed the magic. They went to bed too early. Somebody out of nowhere decides to get a trash can lid and gets a stick, and he sits down on one of the logs around this big-ass fire and just starts dun, dun, dun. None of us knew what he was doing. I had never even heard the words, probably didn't even exist maybe, drum circle. In the 80s. This was in 84, I think, when I did this. And all of a sudden there was a mad scramble. People are running to grab trash cans and logs and canteens and anything you can beat on to join this beat that this guy, he just did it. It was very impulsive. It was spontaneous. And we sat there and created this wonderful cacophony of noise that it would have woken the dead. Luckily, the cabins were way on the other side of the hill, so they didn't hear us. And we bonded over that. And we bonded so much, we stayed up all night and watched the sunrise by the lake. Froze our asses off. But that was a moment with men that I personally had not had in my life because my dad was a drunk and not able to be there like that for me.
Yep.
So I don't know, guys. If you ever have that opportunity, you do not miss it. You'd be chipping yourself.
Yep. There's no doubt about it. There's magic that happens at every single one of them. We don't know where it'll come from. The guys that have been time and time again, or you kind of keep your eyes open for, okay, when is it? And one of the things that it seems to be is that it'll create a safe place for somebody who really needs to get rid of something, that it needs to unload something that they couldn't unload anyplace else, but 60 miles out into the wilderness, where it's safe and it's not going to be overheard, and they feel that camaraderie from the weekend. It usually will happen on like Sunday morning, because they've had Friday, Saturday, and then they finally feel safe enough to let go of something that it'll revolutionize their
magical group process that the group's got. And we got you from Friday, from Saturday. We got you. No matter what happens, we got you. We're here for you. It's okay. And then Sunday, it's okay to share.
Yeah.
And that feeds into today's topic, man. And if you don't have a place where you're unloading these burdens, they're going to kill you. So if you have that opportunity ever, don't let your disease say no. Run towards it. Embrace it. You will not regret it. So thank you for doing that, Dan. Like I say, 10 years is astonishing me. I still remember the first one. So congratulations on doing that for us.
And it's not 10 years of them. It's 10 retreats. The first couple of years I did 2 a year. It was so freaking fun that I did one in the spring and one in the fall, but then that became a little bit too much. And I just think it's a little bit more special when it's just once a year.
And since I was raised on the Minnesota retreat, you know that I prefer the fall retreat myself. But it's hard to sit around a big raging fire when it's hot. But
well, the flip side of it is guys like to swim and this kind of stuff. And I got a pond.
The guys, they want to fish and all.
Yeah. So, you give up one thing, get another, and balance and act.
So today's topic, I told you, was a killer topic. And we all have it. And we're just now beginning to understand the science of how this is affecting the human brain and the human animal. And that topic is trauma. Now, there's a big misunderstanding that I had, even as a therapist, before being awakened in the past couple of years. I've had some great masters of this topic walk through my door. I got a chance to go to trainings for 2 days with the man who wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And he's a genius on the front lines of understanding how trauma affects the brain and the body. But, he used to mention trauma to me, and I'm like, oh, sure, we're talking about sexual abuse, physical abuse, car accidents, people who've been in war, extreme events, right? And we're like, no. Trauma affects everything about a person if it falls outside what's normal to them. Okay, and it's very subjective. What maybe affected one person might not affect another. So, again, trauma is anything that is outside the norm, and when it happens, the event itself is traumatic. That's not the actual trauma. The trauma is what occurs after the event, how your brain and body and soul reacts to it and then carries it for the rest of your life, and your response and or lack of resiliency to be able to deal with it. That is the actual trauma. It's the stuff inside of you, or as I say, the past showing up today, but it's so real it feels like the present is showing up today, because when you have it again, it feels like it just happened yesterday. It's that present, it's that powerful, it's that real. Now, there's a history of this in recovery, which I find fascinating, because we have this overall belief that there's no way Bill Wilson could have written the big book on his own. He was barely 2 years sober. He was going through bouts of clinical depression that they didn't have treatments for. They did not have antidepressants. My sponsor, Dr. Burns Brady, a clinician, says he would have benefited mightily from antidepressants, because he had the kind of depression that's not like, oh, I'm just feeling down, give me a pill. No, he had the depression where he took to his bed for weeks and didn't bathe and didn't do anything and was in terrible bouts of crying and sadness. So this is the guy that wrote the solution for all of us to get free. And somehow in that book, he touches on every area of alcoholism that usually a person could study for 100 years and not figure out all these facets about what's wrong with us. But he looked at it and he said, there's something about these drunks, and addicts too, but he was just dealing with drunks. They come in the program, they get what we're selling, they get excited, they want it, and they get a sponsor, and they get going in the work, and you know what? They're doing good. Everybody around them is thinking, this guy's going to make it. And out of nowhere, out of left field, this curveball comes. And the guy just goes ding, almost like a spell just dinged him on the head. And he goes, I think I'm going to go drink. And he walks out the door and walks right to the bar and gets drunk. And Bill was baffled by that. He says, I don't understand what's happening. Something inside their soul or their brain is corrupting their every intention, because every other part of the person wants to be sober. They want to make progress. They want to make this work and get a better life. So he looked at it and looked at it and looked at it, and the word he came up for trauma, which I believe is what he was studying, was resentments. And if you read our big book, it says clearly, resentments are the number one offender. Now, when I heard that in my treatment center, I was confused because I didn't know what the word meant. And most of my patients are confused. It's a very outdated word. We don't really use it in modern language. So luckily I had a sponsor explain to me it comes from the root terms RE. So anytime you have the letters RE in front of a word, it means to do over and over again. So if you think about the word repeat, RE means to do over and over again. And sentiment comes from the Latin root sentire, which means to feel or experience, sometimes to live. Those are kind of interchangeable definitions as I've seen it. So literally he was seeing there's something going on inside them that when it comes up, they're reliving it and re-experiencing it so powerfully that they'll give up their sobriety journey and walk straight to the bar and get drunk. In other words, it's so powerful, even though it happened when they were 3 or 4 or 10 or 15, it's like it just happened yesterday and it overwhelms their system and they get drunk again. I think it's the magic bullet to understand why people have trouble with relapse over and over and over. It's the one thing we have not really understood, and we're just now beginning to understand the science behind it. To me, it's a revolutionary aspect of addiction treatment. I've been in the field over 21 years, plus I was 4 or 5 years in college doing my thing to get my degrees and my practicum and my trainings and all that stuff. And, we talked about trauma and how prevalent it was, especially around certain populations, but we weren't really thinking in terms of it affects everybody. And now that I'm watching drunks struggle, I'm like, oh, there it is. That's what's going on. They got some unfinished business, another word for resentments, that's showing up. And it's so undealt with and so overwhelmingly powerful, it's causing them to just give up everything. So that's the term he came up with, resentments. Now, when we say it's the number one offender, don't think it's around drinking and drugging only, because I had a great story. One of my friends told Mr. Scott Lee, he had a sponsee who was 10 years sober, and he kept warning him, don't go around your ex. Don't go around your ex. Every time you go around your ex, it's trouble. You're going to end up in prison or dead. Stop. And he didn't listen. And he went over there on a Sunday, and he got in an argument with this person, and they got so emotionally into it, he got on his Harley bike, revved it up to 100 miles an hour, lost control, and ran into the side of a bridge and died. And when Scott Lee tells that story, if you'll listen to his story on YouTube, he's crying for that man because he loved him so much. And he says alcohol didn't kill that man. Resentment killed that man. He was not able to make peace with that issue. And that's the power when Bill says it's the number one offender. We all should be on caution about it. In my group, I started using the terms, what broke your heart? I had a client who just wasn't getting it, and she had been through hell. Anybody looking at her story was like, woman, you got trauma all around you. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's just, I've already made peace with it. It's in the past, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but you're still drinking. That's the number one sign you're not okay with it. If you're still using, stop lying to yourself. You're not okay. And finally I said, fine, well, it's just what broke your heart. And there was this light bulb. It's like, oh. And she said, sit down. How much time do you all have? And she started telling us her list of things that broke her heart, her little child's heart when she was growing up. So now, where does that bring us to today? Well, now we understand it to be trauma, and we now understand that it affects every person. I don't care if you're the President of the United States, or I don't care if you're a drunk laying in a gutter. If you are human, you're going to go through experiences on this planet that are going to test you and be so-called outside the normal limits of what would be considered an average life. Maybe it's a death in your family. Maybe it's a medical emergency that you have yourself, that you have to, chronic illness. Or maybe it's poverty. Maybe it's losing a job that meant a lot to you and you go without work for a long time and you have to move, maybe live in a homeless shelter. All those things, even though we will look at it and say, well, I did fine through that. I bounced back. It's a challenge, but I dealt with it. We're undervaluing what that lingering effect was. Like I said, the event itself was traumatic, but what's left over is the trauma inside and whether or not it's really gone. And with addicts and alcoholics, again, if they're still drinking or drugging, they're not at peace. I always jokingly tell my patients, you don't see the Dalai Lama waking up in the morning and rolling up a blunt and smoking it. He doesn't need it. He's at peace. He has a good spiritual program. So, The second thing you need to understand about trauma is that it's on a spectrum. So we're talking about people who might have minor degrees of trauma, things like, there was a bully in my school when I was in 5th grade, but then after years of kicking my butt, I kicked his butt, so I got payback. So maybe there is some peace with that issue. But still, when you talk about in your 4-step, and yes, that's the stuff that goes on your 4-step, that there was this jerk back in 5th grade. They didn't talk about that when I came into recovery. In the 80s, nobody had healed their inner child unless they went to therapy, and they were a rare bird to find the meetings. I am not joking that the meetings I went to in the early 80s, in 83, my first meeting I hit, was ruled by angry white men who were over-caffeinated and over-nicotined and eating sugar cookies, and they took their shit out on the newcomer. And you will still find that today. If you go to any meeting in the world and you run into a crusty old-timer and he's judging the newcomer, or he's making fun of him, or he's picking on him, or he's got him in the corner doing that to him, that's a guy who has not healed his inner child, period, end of story. We didn't know. And suddenly in the 80s, this movement came along called Adult Children of Alcoholics, which created a science of understanding when you grow up in a dysfunctional family, you're going to have leftover things that are going to affect you in your adult life. And your inner child was affected by that. We'll bounce back to the inner child in a second. But this spectrum we're on is anything from minor traumas and little nitpicks that you think, yeah, there might still be some stuff there, to outlandish like, whoa, man, I was in wartime, or I was in the towers on 9/11. I had a patient who was on the 76th floor when the planes hit the towers. And his story of harrowing, barely making it out, I've never repeated it, nor will I. He honored us with that in group one day. And that man stayed sober for 2 months. And then the doctors gave him too much Xanax, and he died. He made it out of the towers alive, and this disease still got him. That impresses the shit out of me about the power of this illness. So, when we're talking about trauma, you have to sort of honor it the same way I talked about boundaries last week. You have to be honest with yourself about saying, you know what, on second thought, this does bother me. On second thought, this was unfair that my child had to go through this. This ain't about blaming people. We're not trying to blame your parents or say this is their fault or anything. That gets you nowhere in recovery. But what you're looking for is your truth. Let me go on the journey to uncover my truths about, I need to take a second look at how that affected my little kid. Because your little kid experienced things totally different than your adult brain did. We are just now beginning to know the depths of how a child's brain that has not formed does not have the cognition, nor does it have the world experience and knowledge to make sense of what's happening. So to give you just one example of that, if a child's father loses his job and suddenly has to work 2 jobs to support the family, and the father's never at home anymore because he has to work these 2 jobs. Now, the father loves his child, and the father wants to be there with his child, but he's not able to because of economic circumstances beyond his control. And he's doing this out of love for the child. But you know what the child knows? Dad's not there. It must be because of me. It must be because I'm unlovable. Everything in the child's mind reverts back to, there's something about me. There's something about me. Child has no idea about the Federal Reserve, no idea about who's president, no idea about economic downturns or Wall Street crashes. Does not comprehend. So when you're looking back and you're thinking, what's my trauma? You got to get out of your adult head. You got to start feeling. Like, look back at your little girl and your little guy and go like, man, I'm sorry you had to go through that. What was that like for you? Talk to me. What did you feel? How did that, was it scary? Did it really hurt? Did anybody help you with your hurt? Because that's another aspect of trauma. How people reacted around you afterward either made your trauma worse or maybe helped soothe it away. I've heard the guy who wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score, he says, if you're bitten by a dog as a young child, that's a very harrowing and traumatic. It's like a wolf. It's like a monster coming in and biting you, and you draws blood. Now, if your parent picks you up and soothes you and bandages you and hugs you and kisses you and pulls away your tears and gives you an ice cream cone and says it's going to be okay, it's just a dog. Dog doesn't understand. You'll be okay. If you have a family where your dad says, shut up, I'll give you something to cry about. Drink a beer. Us men don't cry. You drink beer. What do you think is going to happen to that child? It may be pathological enough that child ends up in prison for doing something because of pain. We don't like to face that fact in our society. We like to brand people like that guy's different. He's a psycho. He's a killer. Yeah. But we don't like to look at their childhood and say, if you had gone through that childhood, would you have ended up in that same place? I wonder. So, again, that spectrum we need to start looking at. The other thing we need to look at is it only makes sense to me, at least. Everybody in the world gets that every person has a different physical pain tolerance, correct? I've seen people like my grandmother who can take a wound and she's like not bothered at all. She's just like, doesn't bother me. I'm pretty good with pain, but I don't like it. I'm not comfortable. She almost seemed comfortable with pain. I know some people that will faint at the sign of a needle to take a shot or have blood drawn. I had allergy shots since I was a kid. Don't have to have them anymore, thank God. And I'm like, poke me. Whenever nurses are taking my blood, they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, just do what you got to do. I don't like it, but it doesn't bother me. I'll sit there and watch it like it's just blood. Some people can't stand the sight of blood. So we get that people have different physical pain tolerances, but we have been slow to understand it's the exact same with emotional pain. What affected one person one way may not have been the same way another person's genealogy and their life experiences caused them to react differently. So if you have a brother or sister and you grow up in the same family and you're like, how come they weren't fucked up like I was based on what happened in my family? Well, you have your own genes for that. We're just beginning to understand that. We don't really know exactly the full mechanisms of why that works. I'll give you one clearest example. When I was working with the soldiers, we would have two soldiers in the group who were in the same unit and experienced the same event that was so horrific. Again, I would never repeat it outside a group. We're talking like war crimes, horror. Okay, people don't understand. War is the most awful thing on earth. It's nothing that should ever be wished for, ever. And the only people that wish for it have never been in it. But any soldier would tell you that is not what you want to wish for. And one of them will somehow cope, mystery, and re-enlist for 3 more tours, and is fine. And the other person is wrecked for life. And they had to endure that stigma. Our men and women who served our country had to endure this stigma, even from their fellows, that they were weak. There's something wrong with them. They need to just get over it. You need to sign back up and be a soldier. So not only were they struggling with their pain, but on top of that, they were being shamed and stigmatized. It's an absolute travesty. We don't know how the brain works. We know very little about the brain. I will tell you what I saw this week. I just saw a story yesterday that they have discovered it's either a protein, or it's not a neurotransmitter. I thought they were talking about protein in the brain that is directly related to resiliency. In other words, it's going to determine how well you bounce back from trauma and adversity. And they're seeing that genetically that varies in people. Some people have a stronger resiliency and some people don't. And isn't it funny that the people that were just gifted at birth by luck to have stronger resiliency are the people saying, you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Come on, walk it off. What the hell's wrong with you? Blah, blah, blah. Talk about lack of compassion. My God. So get that piece. Everybody's going to react differently to an emotional stimulus. And don't judge. Don't compare. That's the other thing my people do is say, I don't really have trauma. I wasn't sexually abused. I wasn't physically abused. That's not what we're talking about. What happened that broke your heart? What happened that you didn't like? What happened that was uncomfortable for you? Hell, I can talk to a guy who peed his pants in school one time and he was embarrassed by that. Well, that's semi-traumatic, especially if other people made fun of you or if the teacher called you out in front of the whole class. So you need to start investigating those things if you want to keep addiction and other unhealthy behaviors at bay. Because as adults, we are soothing those things in our consumer culture with dopamine all day long. Last week, we were talking about symptom relief with pot versus fixing the actual problem. I can drive down the street and see there's a sign for symptom relief. There's a store for symptom relief. There's a product. I can get Amazon. Ooh, let's order some symptom relief. We live on symptom relief in our country, and we don't want to talk about real issues. But therapy and the 12-step program provides this amazing, safe environment where you can start to do this investigation work. And what is the work? How did I get here? I did not plan for this to happen. You could have asked me at 8 years old, did I want to be in this treatment center with this crazy guy? Did I want to hear all this crap and have to be ordered here because of the courts or because of losing my kids? That is not what you dreamed of. And my argument is it happened along the way. And if you don't unwind that mystery, you're going to repeat it. People are notorious for repeating their patterns. And how many of us have a friend or a relative that we look at and we go, why can't they see it? They keep picking crappy relationships. And meanwhile, we're doing our own stuff. And our ego will not let us see our own patterns, but I can see your pattern and judge you pretty good. But we all do the same stuff. We're human beings. We're as common as dogs and cats. We're going to do the things that soothe us, and we're going to do whatever we're used to, whatever is habitual. So that's where we start with understanding trauma, that it's there. It's playing a way bigger role than we thought in relapse. And now we have some tools to start to deal with it. All right, so I want to get into this theme about why it's so dangerous. When I had this training with the man who was a genius called The Body Keeps the Score. It's Vanderkook or whatever his name is from Norway, I think he is. I need to really identify that clear, but people with names that are a little bit odd, I have trouble with. It's one of my blind spots. I can roll words off as an author, but I have trouble with names sometimes. But we went at length about what happens in the body. First, understand that the trauma's inside. It's not on the outside of you. And it's a mostly subconscious process when it comes up. You will not be aware of it until you're starting to have symptoms. And by that point, you're already possibly into full-blown relapse. That's what makes it so dangerous. It's invisible. It creeps up on you. And what we know now about the body-brain relationship is that the body is giving 80% of the signals to the brain throughout the day. We used to think, and most people still think, the brain is kind of running the show and operating. It's like, no, it's not. It's a computer system. It's just doing what it's programmed to do based on its responses to the environment. So if I walk outside and it's 20 degrees below zero and I don't have a coat on, my brain is going to get a message from my body. Put on a damn coat. It's freaking freezing. You got goosebumps running up and down your body. And the brain's going to start to panic and put you into action to do that to save your life. Everything is coming from your eyes and your taste and your sense of smell, which is one of the most powerful memory senses. And it's feeding to the brain to say something needs attention, something's wrong. So here's how insidious it is. Let's say I get triggered about a memory from a smell, or I go to a building that looks like the building where I was hurt one time as a child or abused. I won't even be aware of it. I will walk in as an adult doing my business, and suddenly my heart rate will start going da-dum, 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 and my breathing will become more shallow. I'll be like, and as I'm doing that, the brain's like, uh-oh, fight or flight time. There's a threat. What's going on? Something's happening. It won't understand what's triggering it. It's responding to the body. And what his argument is in this, and I'm really simplifying this because if you read his book or go to his trainings, this is complicated science. But he's telling us from the science, the body is running the show. The body is remembering the trauma. The body is remembering what's happened to it. And for some people who have extreme physical or sexual abuse trauma, body work is the way out. Things like yoga, things like group work where people are literally holding you while you talk about the event itself. Massage therapy, touch therapy. There's this thing on YouTube you can look at where they'll teach you this pattern touching. And what it does is it distracts the brain while it's having an episode, because while I'm doing this, the brain's getting these pulses from the body going, what is that? What's happening here? I don't understand. With the soldiers with PTSD, we would tell them, you've got to distract yourself. You're not over in Iran, so we need to ground yourself back to this reality. One of the easiest tools was to take off your shoes and rub your feet on the carpet to tell yourself you're safe. I'm safe. I'm home. I'm safe. I'm home. I'm safe. I'm home. If that wasn't enough, go to the ice box and put globs of ice in your hand. That burning will distract the brain. You won't hurt yourself. It will become painful. But at a certain point, your brain will be like, ah! And it will let go of the memory, and it will focus you on the present. Again, we're just beginning to learn these distraction techniques and these effective techniques. But I'm going to give you the number one tool you need to start with, folks. You need to be honest and start talking. Find your support, whether it's a sponsor, a therapist, or a group. Find someone who's qualified in trauma, or even a good addiction counselor hopefully should know a lot about trauma. Not all of them do. It's a rather new science. And I want to me, it's one of the funnest parts of recovery. And I know it doesn't sound like it, but it really is a lot of fun work. I want to be like the Detective Columbo. Anybody ever seen that show? He literally is bumping through the entire episode. And he's got this trench coat on, and he's got this little stogie, and he's just walking through the house going, oh, what's this over here? And, oh, we got this over there. And how does this work? And he finds a clue. And that's what you should be doing with your life's work. Be willing to turn over every single rock, every single pebble to say, is there something there? Is there something there? The one thing you don't want to do is say, I'm fine. It doesn't bother me, because your actions will betray you. Even if it's not alcohol and drugs, maybe you're eating all the wrong foods and you're overweight. Or maybe you're having affairs on your wife, cheating on her with pornography, and you don't agree with that. Whatever it is, it's going to come out somewhere. The trauma will show up. That's the science of it. If it's not dealt with, it's still there. So it's a very complicated, very complex, just beginning to understand issue. But my main argument for today was to bring it to your awareness that it's a key for why people are continuing to relapse. I will have nurses and psychiatrists and other professionals, even at my own hospital, approach me and say, I don't understand why they're still drinking. I don't understand. I say, well, maybe if you had walked a mile in their shoes, you would understand what they've been through. And again, it's invisible. You ask the person what's going on, they're not going to see it that way. They may see it like, well, that's just every family was like that, or everybody didn't have a dad, or everybody's dad was a hard ass, or whatever it was. I will tell you, a lot of my patients will have a military dad, or a cop dad, or even a priest dad, and not realize that there's a certain amount of trauma with growing up with that kind of energy, because they had to be extra perfect or extra rigid about having their bed made a certain way. And again, it's anything outside the normal. Now, normal is a tricky term. We don't really use it in therapy, but normal in that ideal, with an L, ideal. What's an ideal circumstance for a child? I'll give you one. A child should have both parents at home. I know this may not be popular, but if it's an ideal upbringing, they should have a father and a mother in their life. Maybe not always home, but in their life. And we have divorce, we have death, we have addiction, we have lots of reasons why people only grow up with one parent or no parents. I have many patients that are orphans, and they lived in the system, and they won't see that as trauma. That's literally how crazy it is. It's right in your face. And we're just thinking we're being brave by ignoring it. You're not. You're being stupid to ignore it. So I want to encourage everybody to take that journey. If you want to check out that book, The Body Keeps the Score, there's a brilliant, he's on YouTube as well. Just look up the name of the book. You'll find him. If you want to look up the other great expert on YouTube you may have heard of, his name is Gabor Mate, Gabormate. He's a genius. Now, I disagree with him on some of his views, and I want you to know that that's healthy among experts to disagree on things we don't really know the answer to. He's not big on the genetic part of the addiction, but I have to disagree from my own experience, because I got to tell you, from the minute I touched drugs, my body took over and my brain said go on a level I've never seen happen in very many people except other addicts. And I didn't ask for that. That was just genetically the way my body reacted to the substance. Go. I mean, I didn't have a honeymoon. I was instantly changing friends and going and doing behaviors that I didn't agree with. Instantly. It didn't work up to it. So, it's okay to have disagreements, because we don't really know all the answers yet. So, but he's fascinating about talking about the role that the pain, and he's suffered from trauma in his own life as well. So I love people that have personal experience. So do me a favor, and just for me, it may sound silly, take a moment to sort of hug your little kid inside and tell that little child, whether it's a man or a little girl, and say, I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to go on this journey to save you. I'm an adult now. I have that power. I have money. I have resources. I have friends. I have tools. I'm going to go back and save you from in that closet or in that dark space crying and you're nobody giving you any attention. Instead, you want to know what addicts and alcoholics do? Their little kid causes them to feel anxiety or distress and says, I need a hug. They stick their boot on the little kid's throat and pour Jack Daniels down his throat. That's what addicts and alcoholics do. That is abuse. When we're using, it's very abusive. That burn in your chest from the smoke or from the alcohol going down or up your arm and holding it down, that smoke till you burst your lungs, that's self-abuse. Versus give your little kid a hug and say, I'm going to stop running from you and I'm going to listen and I'm going to learn and I'm going to be open to go on that journey. One last thing I'll say about it, because we talked about it in group today. There was a book that came out in the 80s that I read called Second Stage Recovery. There was also a bunch of articles that Bill Wilson wrote called Emotional Sobriety. So even our co-founder was onto this idea that there's more work to be done. You can't just get sober and say, I'm good. There's wounds, there's hurts, there's things that need attention. And nobody in their right mind would leave a physical wound open. At least I hope you wouldn't. Like you'd just watch it get infected and bleed out. You would die. Of course not. You would go and get it taken care of and Band-Aid stuff. Well, somehow in America, we think emotional wounds just go away. Just with time, I just don't feel it anymore. It's a lie. Unattended wounds get worse, And emotional wounds are the worst for alcoholic and addict relapse. So take that journey for yourself, because you deserve to heal that. And when you do, you will know the true meaning of the words happy, joyous, and free, which is the ultimate goal of recovery. Happy, joyous, and free, versus my oppressors own me the rest of my life, and the people I hated are determining my feelings and what's worthy in my life. You get free of that, it's like shackles off of you. I had so much family stuff I had to get free of. I promise you, it's so worth it. Start reading some books, look it up on the internet, and find some meetings. Even if you want to start your own. I want to work on my childhood stuff. Get a therapist. I got a guy in my life right now that's doing that, and I'm excited for him because I know he's going to heal and go that next level from doing that. And I always say it's the last thing, but this is the last thing. There's a lot of people in our program who are not as happy as they should be in their recovery, and it's because they're neglecting their child work. They have not done their work to heal themselves from their childhood, even though they think there's nothing there. You got to look first. Really uncover every stone. All right. If you have any questions about that, please send me. It is extremely complicated. I gave you all the dumbed down Christopher, please understand version, because it gets so complicated. It's easy to lose people with the science of trauma. So now we enter into our discussion portion, and I get a chance to ask our friend Dan the Man, who I think, if I remember right, probably didn't believe he had that much trauma because he had a good family and, everything was pretty good.
Yep. And I had that misconception that trauma equal balance. It had to have something impactful, that spectrum of trauma. I was only looking at the peak of the curve, not at the little things. And, that is the magic of the fourth step, is that you sit down and go in there and take time to go look back over your life and dig all that stuff out. There's not a guy I've ever worked with, including myself, that wasn't surprised with the amount of content that ended up being on their fourth step. A lot of times people do also overinflate that, you can't believe what I've been through kind of stuff. But, everybody has it. Everybody does. You'd mentioned something about dogs, and in my own particular story, I have a couple times when I was a little kid where I was chased by dogs. I got bit by dogs. And to this very day, I'm scared to death of dogs. And only really in the past maybe 12 months have I got in touch with that, going on 10 years of recovery, that I finally actually accept that. And I'd walked up to this lady's door, a client, and her dog busted through between her legs and come out, and it was a little dog. And I turned around and about tripped and fell and screamed. And when I'm backpedaling after that little dog, and it brought that to life to me, wow, what a reaction to that,
No thought. No weight. It's instantaneous. The body made you do that.
Yep.
The body made you pull away, not the brain.
Yep.
That was too quick for the brain to react.
Yep. And
that's the point right there.
Yep.
Exactly.
And go back and think about that. And now I can actually, people think I'm joking with them when I tell them I'm afraid of dogs, but I am core in there someplace deeper than I can control, afraid of dogs. I can manage it, right? It's not debilitating, but it's definitely one of those things that was a traumatic event for me. And I go back and look at the two times I can think of being chased by dogs. And one of my, these people got to have these mean dogs. That seems to have always been a cool thing to do for some goofy reason. And he had two Doberman Pinschers, and they were mean as all get out, man. And they got out. When I went over there one day, somebody had left the fence a little bit, not the gate a little bit of ajar. And they come out, and when they come out up against the fence, it popped it open. And I ran for my life. I actually ran up the street and was able to make it into in the barber shop, some kind of shelter, or else, who knows what would have happened to me.
Probably safety, man.
And your analogy, yours and Scott Lee, also that thing, I love it. Life, when I was born, I was given this garbage can with backpack straps. You could also parallel that to, we used to use Army duffel bags to carry stuff in, the ones with the backpack straps. And every event in my life, every single thing that happens to me, I pick it up and I put it in that trash can.
Because I'm getting high and I don't want to deal with it right now.
Yeah. And even before, when I was a little kid, something happened, I put it in a backpack. And I don't even realize I'm carrying this backpack around, but all that life's events are in that pack. And, with this negative bias thing, another way to put it is like the bad apple in the barrel, right? Mm-hmm. If you put a few bad apples in a barrel of good apples, it's going to ruin all the good apples in there. And I've got these events in my life that I'm telling myself that doesn't bother me anymore. And those are the bad apples in my backpack. And, you reach some stage in life, and for different people, it's a different, where your bottom is a different thing. I notice that for males in my circle, someplace around the mid-30s, that backpack is full and topped off, and you can't fit anything else in it, and the bad apples are starting to really take over all the good stuff. And in this process that we do with these 12 steps, man, we get to dump that garbage can out and polish up the good apples and process the trauma, the bad apples, the different things that are in there that I've been telling myself aren't bothering me anymore. Or maybe I have there's always some things that I have really effectively suppressed that I am not consciously thinking of, but that it's still in there, and it's in there just like that fear of the dog that I'm not able to control when it happened. Those things are in there causing me to repeat patterns that I'm not even, like I said the other night, I can't see me very well. And so I get with a trusted person and I sit down and go through it, and I'm actually able to process those things and put them in a place where they belong.
And again, the biggest mistake people make is they approach it from their adult mind. So I'll hear people say things like, well, I understand my dad better now. I know why he did that, and it makes sense. And it's like, you don't know. Your little kid is still in the closet crying about it.
Yeah, right.
You have to go back and get that child and hold it and heal it and do this work. You can tell yourself all you want, it doesn't bother you. It's going to show up. If anybody has tried to have a child not want a cookie and then throw a fit in the middle of the store because they're going to get cookies, trying to ignore that.
Yeah.
That's what you're dealing with. A child that's hurting is going to let you know it's hurting one way or another.
Yeah, yeah. And one of my recovery heroes, Bob Earl, we talked about him before. He was big in that early on, talking about the little kid inside and the things that was happening to him, and he was getting flack from it in AA because we don't, that's not what we're doing here. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was part of the start of that. Adult children groups, yeah. Adult children of alcoholics groups.
Mm-hmm. He was in case you've never heard of him, he was a prophet before his time. And his people, the ones that picked up on his message, would follow him. And I don't know if he encouraged them or they started doing this. They started bringing their teddy bears to meeting. Yeah. And you should have seen the old timers flip out. I couldn't imagine something like that happening in my groups back in the day. If I had, I would have joined on board just to irritate the old guys, right? But yeah, that's why we're here. We're here to heal. We're not here to pretend like everything's fine. The old joke in AA is, the guy got home from work, his boss yelled at him, he's going to fire him because he's screwing up. He drives like an idiot through traffic. He gets home late. His wife's yelling at him about something, so he slaps the kids around because they're not doing right. And then he gets in the car and drives 90 miles to the meeting because he's late again. He walks in the door and says, hey, how you doing, Bob? I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Everything.
I haven't heard the acronym for fine. It's fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and egotistical.
Yeah. But there's a lot going on in the trauma world, and even in yoga, there's the style of yoga that's called trauma-informed yoga. I was at a client's house that was talking about her training in that area. And people are starting to Gabor Mate, and a lot of people are starting to shine a light on it. And that's a good thing. We're going to dig some of that out, and hopefully
the power of human touch, and especially with people who have had sexual abuse or rape. That movie Manodrome I was telling you about turned out to be, I didn't like the way it ended, so I can't recommend it. But there's a moment when he's really trying to get the guy to open up, and he's got all these blocks, and he's really fighting him. He's just like, and the guy puts his hand out and just puts it, and the guy's really sketchy about touching him. He's like, what's this all about? What's he going to do? And he puts his hand on his chest. He goes, just breathe. Just breathe, man. That's all you got to do. Just breathe. And that touch brought out the pain. Instead, we've got all these walls. They bar walls up, and any counselor or anybody gets near it, we shoot back and we hurt the person.
Yeah. Yeah. Our group hugs.
Yeah. You want to make a newcomer uncomfortable, hug them.
Yeah. But you see that it's one of the little things that makes us different, that puts that, because we're embracing one another as men when we get there. The handshake is rather sterile, right? It means a completely different thing. But and I see guys when they begin to embrace the hug, at first there's just a little butterfly tap and they're just really standoffish about it, like, ooh. And then after a little bit, they start hanging around and you can feel them hug you back. And
there was a fellow in our group last week who gave me one of those half hugs. I made him stop. I said, "What's that shit? Give me a real hug." And he power hugged me for a second. But there's what guys do. I'm tell the truth here. Guys give you like the horse collar, like, come here, buddy. Good to see you. That kind of shit. And it's like, it's no front facing each other because God knows genitals must not touch. And then women are terrible about that. Women will stick their butts way out and they give you that little pat on the back, like, okay, there's no sexual thing about this. Yeah. I mean, just give me a damn hug. I'm not gonna do anything. It's that untrust. It's that we've been raised with. And sadly, in Western culture, that is a lot of what is wrong with people, in my personal opinion, is the lack of touch. Yeah. Now, we're getting into attachment issues, which I didn't even get to go into today. Your lack of attachment and being taken care of, what you need as a human child. As a human child, you're very vulnerable. We're one of the most vulnerable species, and we're longer than other species are. And if you don't have parents to be there for you and care for you, you die.
We're actually born premature.
And this skin is very vulnerable. You can easily puncture it and kill us. So, and the baby skin is even more soft. So, I'll tell you the story I wanted to tell earlier that it just exemplifies this work. Vandercook said he had a client in his office. It was a couple, and the marriage was not going well. And the wife is saying, he just won't open up, and I want him to share, and he won't admit his feelings and talk to me. And the husband's just sitting there like, I don't know what she's talking about. And he did some work with the man on the side, this trauma work, and he come to find out there was a suppressed subconscious memory, that there was so much strife and dysfunction in the family when he was a baby, that he was in the crib crying for hours for someone to come and respond, to give him a bottle, to change his diapers, to tell him to pick him up and hold him and tell him it's okay. And he didn't get very much touch. There was very little physical touch in my family except for my mother. My dad rarely gave us I hugged my dad for the first time in treatment, and he stiffed up like a board, like, what the fuck? That's another gift you can bring to your family, is hugging them. But he said, and so we connected those dots to this man today who's in treatment, trying to figure out what's blocking him, and he doesn't trust. He's saying in his subconscious mind, I did that. He actually remembers from being an infant, I did that. I called out for help. I shared my needs, and nobody was there for me. So there's no use. What's the point? And when he revealed that to the man, they found it together, the block shifted, and suddenly he was able to talk and share more. Yeah. That's how powerful these things are. They can hold you silent. They can hold you hostage. But we in the ego, I am master of my own ship. I am control of everything. It's a lie. Yep. There's more things running your show than you have any idea.
Putting off the happy front, and it's not okay to be unhappy, so I got to pretend to be happy and pretend to be okay.
Especially at a meeting, I got to show like I'm Mr. Sobriety. Yeah. Nothing to see over here. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. If we knew half of what anybody in our group was doing behind closed doors or on their own, we'd be like, yep, that's pretty much addict behavior, but you'll never see that at a meeting. Yeah. Well, I have to say at our meeting, they're honest about it. That's different, but at an average meeting. Yeah, yeah.
So. But it is, I listened to a podcast today about a guy who claims that he went back and remembers being born, and he didn't experiment. He talks about it on this podcast where his wife is pregnant, and he started putting a flashlight against his wife's belly and playing music and doing stuff. And inside the womb, the kid was pushing at wherever the light was at. Like he'd move the bell, it moved the light over to the other side of her belly. Awesome. And like trained almost, it didn't happen right off the bat, but through some music and light stuff, and when the kid is born, then they have a musical talent that supersedes what is normal, like come out from that. And he put on it that it was because of the stuff he was doing prenatal. Pretty wild stuff.
That is a real science. We're just beginning to understand how the fetus
the trauma that you might have received when you were still inside your mama.
In utero. Yeah. And if your parent was drinking or drugging, we know that affects the fetus dramatically. So again, the main message from today is have an open mind, because this is an answer for you to find your way to a better life. There may be a lot more trauma than you know. Now, when I was in this training, he made one clarifying statement over and over at the end for us counselors. We are not talking about the family enough. We are not talking about the family enough. we are not talking about the family enough in treatment. And I have shifted. I mean, I used to do a lot of family work, but I'm almost doing a lot more, almost like exclusively to some degree. And my patients are responding very favorably. It's bonding the group. They're excited about treatment. They want to come learn every day and uncover new things about themselves. But he said you need to be asking questions like, who did they hang with as a child? Were they solo? Did they have just a few friends? Were they part of a crowd? Who did you sit with at lunch? Boy, when he brought that up, I can't even remember, but I thought, wow, now see, I had a little bit of an emotional reaction when he asked that, because that's a pressure situation for a child to sit with the cool kids or sit by yourself or be stigmatized. Were there bullies around you, which is true of all children. There's always a bully in the crowd somewhere. Just try it. Be willing to go down that journey, because it's rewarding. It's extremely rewarding. And one last thing, I guess it's always one last thing, but seriously, some of the people that are running our country and running the government and the corporations, they're some of the most pathological, psychopathic, narcissistic sociopaths who don't care about anybody or anything. And if you go back and learn their journey, it's like they were not held. They were not allowed to express emotion. Their father was a hard ass or wasn't there for them. And they're fucked up. And we honor them because they're able to make a lot of money and allow them the gift of this power to run things for us and set an example for my kids that that's how you should be. Ever heard the phrase in corporate terms, don't admit you're sorry, it shows weakness?
Yeah.
Stupidest thing in the world. In our program, if you don't go and do an amends, you're a weakling. Doing your amends makes you a strong man to face that you did something wrong. You're going to clean it up. But instead, no, screw you. I didn't do anything wrong. That's pathological. That is not good. But we celebrate that in our country. It's insane. We're just sick. That's all I can say. So great discussion. Appreciate you saying all that. And again, the theme is always bring in your questions. If there's anything I can help you with on the trauma front, please let me know. There's a lot we missed because it's that complicated an issue. So go on the journey. Check it out. I know some people who've read the full book, The Body Keeps the Score. I can't do it. It's just thick. Yeah. It's tough reading. It's scientific. It's very sterile sometimes.
Let's take a break before we switch gears.
That sounds good to me. All right, now we will go into our questions phase of the program today. As we said, if you have anything on your mind, any life issue that's bothering you, please send it to us at iam12recovery@gmail.com. The word recovery, iam12recovery@gmail.com. We will read your question. I promise we'll address every question we get, and we will keep you anonymous. We won't out you. Let people know who is asking the question. So that literally gives you freedom to talk about anything that is arable, that YouTube won't cancel us. All right, we got 4 good questions this week on all different topics. So let's get right into it. I sought out recovery to better my life. I did the 12 steps. I emptied out my garbage can. That's what Dan was talking about, that thing strapped to your back with all your life experiences. So how do I deal with the struggles of impulses to buy things I don't need, especially when life happens? You all know what that's like when life happens. It happens to me almost on a daily basis when something I don't like occurs. I have recently purged my house of all the unused and unwanted items. Congratulations. That's huge. There is a great cleansing and a feeling of lightness that happens. I've been trying really hard to get things out of my life. And I've sort of hit a roadblock, but I need to get back at it. I'll describe a little bit more about that in a second. So I try to go through the list of questions of whether I should buy something or not. There's actually a list from books and from a program, Overspenders Anonymous, where they can justify whether it's just you're doing it out of wanting to feel better or whether you actually genuinely need the thing that you're gonna use it, not just let it hang in the closet or something. But sometimes the want overtakes the need. How true that is. So how can I make a habit out of not looking or thinking of things I think I need over the things I really need? I really love the empty spaces on my shelves now, and I don't want to make a habit out of filling those shelves back up and or having to purge again. Oh, great question. that little dopamine hit that Dan hit on the other week, and we all feel when we get the Amazon truck pull up or whatever it is, UPS, and the boxes are for us, and you get to unpackage it and get it out of the wrapper and see the shiny new thing, and then you set it down on the shelf and you're like, okay, I have to go back to my normal life right now. So it is a very temporary high, but boy, the expectation and even the alerts and notifications they send you about it's on the way. It's on the way. Okay, keep telling me it's on the way. Get me more excited. It's our culture. It's just, we are defined by the things we own. And as they said in the movie Fight Club, don't let the things you own define who you are or your life. And it's just American culture. We're taught that our identity comes from, what are the questions they ask celebrities? What designer are you wearing? What car are you driving? Old Bob Earl, again, I've mentioned him before in this podcast, so shout out if you want to look him up. It's EARLL, 2 L's, on YouTube. Hear his story. It's fantastic, Bob Earl. But he says, when he finally made it in Hollywood as a writer, and he wasn't able to write. So that was a blessing of recovery that he even ended up a writer on some of these shows that you may have heard about. I think one of them was Starsky and Hutch or something like that.
Yep, Hill Street Blues.
Hill Street Blues. Just crazy, man. And he said, I was making the kind of money where I could finally buy the car that would impress people. But because we went to parties in L.A. and they had valets, nobody saw what I was driving. So I feel like if you were able to buy a car like that, you should have a detachable hood ornament that you can wear on your chest and go in there and let everybody know that you're successful and that you drive this kind of car. Now, mind you, this was before the 90s and late 80s when rappers started to wear Mercedes-Benz and other necklaces around their necks. He was way ahead of his time when he came up with this concept. But again, it's that idea that my possessions are my identity, who I am, what defines me, even my home, right? For the men, it's the cars and the motorcycles and the toys and the tools. For the women, it's the house and my nest. Now, not trying to make stereotypes, but I've known a lot of women, and it's their house. It's not your house. It's their house. And they'll decide whether you can bring a certain item in that it goes with what they have. And they're nitpicky down to the little valances over the curtains and everything. As a man, you're like, what? I didn't even notice that. Not always, as generalizations. But my point is, that's just who we are. It's so ingrained in our culture that I need to buy something to fulfill and complete myself. It takes a little bit of recovery work to really get out of that. Distracting yourself with a purpose, finding your thing that you love to do and really pursuing that can fulfill that. I don't need to buy as much if I feel like I'm doing something worthwhile with my life and I'm really excited about it. I'm distracted at least from buying stuff. We all like new stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. But then the new stuff becomes old stuff, and it's just sitting around in the closet. We have a friend of ours who's taking clothing to the poor. And I was like, I'm ready for you, bro. I need to purge. And I just went through recently and just said, I'm not wearing it. I'm not wearing it. And they say that. They say if you haven't worn it in a year, you need to get rid of it. And all those things that we say we're going to fit back in one day, it's never going to happen maybe. So you can buy new clothes if you lose the weight. Just get rid of it. Let somebody else use it. And there is a feeling of really, really feels good to let somebody have something of yours that it's going to make a world of difference to them. Whereas for you, it's just sitting in the drawer. So I would encourage you strongly. If you went to the work to already cleanse your space, don't fill it back up the best you can. Use your sponsor if you have one. Lean on your supports. Call and say, I'm wanting to buy this, but I don't really need it. Try to investigate what feeling's going on with you that you're trying to fix by getting that item. And having some disciplines, man. If you know you're going to be vulnerable, just don't even go on the site. Sometimes it's irresistible because all I got to do is press a button and I'm right to Amazon or Macy's or wherever I'm going. Just try to resist the power, man. Even if you have those little victories where just for today I didn't buy something, I would celebrate that. But, if you have a slip or you do a little bit of it, no big deal. But then look at that thing as there is a philosophy with food and with cigarettes. They're finding out that as you're learning about how bad they are for you, the bad food we have today, we'll have a whole episode, I think, next time on that. You should keep doing it while you're learning about the knowledge about what it's doing. So I say, as you get the new thing, start looking at it on the shelf and saying, did I really need that? It's just sitting there. And now I got to dust it. It's more things for me to have to dust. What the hell? But I understand it. I don't know if there is a way to overcome it because we're just trained on that from birth. We go to school. The poor kids nowadays, if they're not wearing the right clothes and stuff, we had a little bit of that back in the day. You get beat up, right? But nowadays, it's like you got to have the right cell phone. You got to have this. You got to have that. Well, you're not cool. You don't have this. I don't get it. I don't want to be identified by a corporate symbol, but it just seems to be part of our culture, you know. I'm a Ford guy. I'm a Dodge guy. I use this kind of gun and you use that kind of gun. So you're cooler than me, blah, blah, blah. So, but keep talking about it. And I wish I could offer more use to you, but, I think it's going to be a one case at a time scenario where you have some successes, sometimes where I could have done better, but accept it and love yourself and say, I did the best I could, but I needed to buy something to feel better. It's okay. Okay to have a slip every now and then. Except with alcohol and drugs. We're the only ones that have to avoid entirely. Otherwise, we're getting in real trouble. All right. Second question for today. What are the various stress management techniques that you are aware of? How can we get out of the psychological changes that our bodies experience? General adaptation syndrome, such as fight or flight, resistance phase, or the following period of exhaustion. After fight or flight, there's always that cortisol drop. Cortisol and adrenaline runs through your body, your fight or flight, and then there's always that crash after that. Happens too when you're extremely angry and you vent, and then all of a sudden you just feel like you just lost all your energy. So I find myself personally dealing with fatigue and irritability when I am under stress. Yes. Well, I saved this question for today because it was around the trauma issue. And if I'm having some of these responses, I think it's important to start to investigate what is my unhealed traumas. What are the things in my childhood I'm overlooking? The things I'm belittling or saying weren't that bad. Worst things you can do is to rationalize or minimize. I tell my patients this all the time. Rationalize is to intellectually explain that it really wasn't that bad, and minimize and say, oh, it's stupid. I'm not going to tell my sponsor. He's going to think I'm a wimp to tell him this bothers me. But the more you start to identify and get some tools for those triggers, you'll get better at control of your body. Right now, if it's happening, especially if you're in an early recovery, it's happening on automatic pilot, that you're having these responses to the world. And when you're reacting strongly to anything in early recovery, it's almost always what's inside of you more than the event itself. You're bringing stuff to the table to cause you to react that big. And then you're mad at yourself later that I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that. Oh, damn it. What's wrong with me? And I had many episodes like that in my early recovery. So that's the first thing I would do is say, okay, there's probably some more work I need to do around that fight or flight feeling. And where else did I feel that as a child? Or where else did I feel that growing up? Who in my life made me feel that way when I was around them? Or uncomfortable and had to get out of there, or smothered like I felt in my family, like, don't just get off me. When my dad would come drunk and try to hug on us and stuff, it's the only time he showed affection, and I hated it. I hated that breath. I hated the smell, everything about it. Fatigue and irritability, yeah, I think that's part of the anger syndrome. It's part of the resentment. It's part of the trauma syndrome. So you said what are various techniques? All right, so breathing and meditation. And I know that's not an answer people love to hear, but it has changed my entire life. We'll have a whole episode about how to breathe, and an effective technique I found that's easy to learn and you can use it anywhere. I would say anything physical. If you can work out and get those feelings out by punching a bag or lifting weights and then hitting the sauna right after that. Or a lot of my friends do the cold plunge. When you do those techniques, it shifts the whole body metabolism, because if you do a cold plunge, your body's going to be like, whoa, and you'll forget all about everything else, and it reinvigorates them. They come out feeling like they're brand new. I can't quite do that myself. I've tried a cold shower, and I can't even stand that. They actually say cold's more effective for that than the sauna is, but I love the sauna. I've done that myself. Physical activity, I think, is a great way to work that stuff out. Sometimes we're under so much pressure in life, we don't realize we need a physical outlet. You know, we just have that general sense of unease at the end of the day, but we didn't do anything to discharge everything we absorbed, everybody else's negativity, the news, everything we're taking all day long. And you got to get that back out of you in some way. And Dan's a big fan of naps. So whether it's a nap or a meditation, I don't distinguish between the two.
I don't either anymore.
I took a 40-minute nap meditation yesterday where I would come to, and then I fade, and then come to, and it shifted all my energy. But that's just because I practiced on that breathing technique. Yep. Just did a little practice to get good at it. I will tell you one piece of hope for you for the future, getting those techniques under your belt. You're going to be very proud of yourself because you'll have mastery over your emotions. Nobody will be allowed to get your goat. Nobody can sort of change your mood, but their stuff. You can feel them doing it, but you got your barriers, you got your armor on, and you're just breathing, and it just can't get in. So talk to your sponsor about it, and definitely keep asking questions. We do the best we can on some of these, but it's kind of a journey. I'm just going to tell you straight. I was a basket case in my early recovery, so you're probably doing better than I was. People in my home group said, dude, this is when I went back to visit them when I was sober many years. We didn't tell you, but when you came in, you were moving 10,000 miles a minute, but you weren't flinching a muscle. And that was my stuff. That was that inside. So be patient with yourself. You're in early recovery. It takes a little time to sort of master some of these other things. And ask around your group. It's not just your sponsor, but there may be other people in there that can give you techniques that work for them. All right. Relaxing isn't actually an alcoholic addict quality. We don't know how to relax easily, so with all that noise in our head. All right. Question number 3. I would like some clarification on drug addiction. Let me get a little sip of water here. I have always said that you control the drug, don't let the drug control you. I work all week and only drink or that make me a drug addict or an alcoholic. If prescribed Xanax for anxiety or Adderall for ADHD and I take it as prescribed, would that count against my sobriety? First of all, great questions, very honest, and I appreciate you being willing to ask these straight up questions, which most people would be afraid to ask, but it's in complete confidence, so nobody knows who you are. I can speak from my own experience. If you're an addict or an alcoholic, you'll have this inner voice that if you're cheating or if you're getting into addictive behavior, your conscience won't lie to you. Now, a lot of us had no power to stop that, and that's the second piece, and I'll explain that in a second. But while I'm having that little voice, I can tell you many times I knew when I was screwing up. I knew when I was doing the wrong thing. I knew that I should not be stealing from my family. I knew I should not be getting high and not going to work, and I just ignored it. But it was there. If you listen, your truth will reveal itself. Your voice will tell you, you're screwing up, dude. This is actually not good. Even though my brain's trying to tell me, no, I got this. I'm in control. Now, let's be very clear about this. There is one thing and one thing that defines an addict or an alcoholic: loss of control. Now, if you're going to tell me you can maintain using these things and maintain control of your life and it's not causing any consequences, God bless you. I would give you the seal of approval. I have no interest in telling anybody else not to drink or drug. We say in AA, if you want to drink or drug, it's your business. If you want to quit, it's our business. Okay? I don't judge people for that. But I would ask the people around you what they think about your using. We are not the best seers, as Dan said the last episode.
See myself.
I cannot see myself. And so I will lie to myself. That's another quality of addicts. I will be in delusion. That's the number one thing we suffer from, guys. We don't suffer from drinking and drug. We suffer from the delusion that I'm fine and I can do this like other people. And I will find any methodology to prove to myself. Bill says through every form of experimentation and deception. Brilliant terminology. As a writer, I love this sentence. He will try every form of self-experimentation and self-deception to prove he can drink like other men, and therefore he's not alcoholic. So you switch to beers, or you only use on the weekend, or you smoke pot, or you do whatever you do. These are the lies we alcoholics do. You may not be an alcoholic. That is a personal journey that people have to decide for themselves. I even tell my patients that. I will give you all this information while you're here and let you make up your own mind. I will tell you the power of the group, and as people tell their stories, invariably 95% of the people that come in and say they don't want to tell the truth and they don't think they're an alcoholic end up saying, I am one too. I am one too. And it's like, well, thank God you could hear some of the truth around you. But again, the truth comes from other people around you. How do other people feel about your using? How's it affecting their lives? Because we do hurt a lot of people by being selfish and using the way we use. The Big Book defines alcoholism as 2 ways, and I think it's the best definition I've ever heard in my life. We have all kinds of testing, the Michigan Alcoholic Survey, and all these other things we can ask you. Do you drink in the morning? Do you interfere with work? But Bill says this. It's so brilliant. If, when you want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. Now, when he says, if when you honestly want to, that's not somebody else making you stop. That's not your kids making you stop. That's not the courts making you stop. It's not a treatment center. It's you saying, no, you know what? I need to take a break. I'm going to put it down. But you find you cannot quit entirely. There's the catch. It's a brilliant lawyer phrase. It means if you're still smoking, if you're still doing a little something on the side, you ain't entirely clear of it. You're fooling yourself. And he says, or, so it's not both of these, it's either one, or when you're using, you find it, you have little control over how much you take. And he says, you're probably an alcoholic. Most of my people I can get with that phrase, did you lose control? Yeah, I lost control, obviously. I got arrested for drunk driving, whatever. I lost my kids, whatever it is. Or my kids left me, whatever it is. But the other one about, can you be entirely honest, that have you fully quit? And every single one of my patients that comes in my group and says, I don't think I have a problem with pot. You know what I say to them? Sounds great. Let's see how you do. And they're like, what do you mean by that? Well, you're not allowed to use it during this program, so let's see how you do. We do not know how addicted we are to anything until we have to stop it. You do not know how much power Cheetos has over your life until you're not supposed to be having no Cheetos because your doctor says stop eating them. And it will kill you to learn, oh my God, I'm feeding him for some freaking Cheetos. Tell a human being they can't have something and it brings out their truth. That's the best definition. See how you do. See if you can put everything down for a while. And if you can, it's up to you to decide. I pray, though, for anybody out there that's struggling with that, don't go too far with that you hurt many more people than you want to hurt. And don't get consequences before it's too late. I've seen too many people. Hell, we had this kid in Louisville that was high on something, ran his car up on the fucking sidewalk and ran over a kid right in front of their parents and killed it. Dumbass 19-year-old kid just getting high, not thinking he has a problem. And then now it's too late. His life is screwed. He is never getting out of prison. It was all over the news. If your case is on the news every night in a small town, relatively, you ain't getting out of that one. And I see that all the time. If you wait too long and play with that, don't cry about the consequences. Now, the second piece of the question, real quick, about whether or not you're taking your medications. I know from a patient in my group that they have real ADD or ADHD. If they can take their medication as prescribed and they never cheat, and they're not using it to get high, they're using it as medicine, and they will have the effect that's appropriate for that medication. It will calm them down. It does not get them up. If I took Adderall, I'd be bouncing all over here. I already bounce around enough. Y'all don't need to see that. But a real person who has that condition, it will settle them down. Now, Xanax is not a good drug. It's a lie that it treats anxiety. It doesn't. It treats the symptoms, and it makes it worse. It makes it way worse. Anxiety is a class of drugs called benzodiazepines. They're downers. They're depressants. It's alcohol in a pill. So if you have problems with alcohol, do not touch them. You're having alcohol. It's the same drug. It affects the depressant receptor in your brain. Very specific receptor for alcohol and these drugs, benzodiazepines. Anything that ends in PAM, because the drug companies get fancy, lorazepam, azazepam, diazepam. If it has PAM in it, it's a benzo, which is a downer. And it puts a blanket on how you feel, which is great. You're comfortable for that night. Maybe you can sleep. As soon as the drug runs out, that blanket is ripped off. And because your body got that false sense of ease and comfort, now everything is even more electric and more anxiety provoking. It's a side effect slash back. There's a word.
It's like a rebound.
Rebound. That's it. It's a rebound effect that all of a sudden it gets shot up more. And so then what do I have to do? I have to use more to keep chasing it. It is not, I repeat, a good drug for anxiety. Now, there may be some people who disagree with that, but it's symptom relief. Might as well go to the store and get yourself a Jack Daniels. Is that going to cure your anxiety? No, of course not. But look it up, man. We are in, again, these drug companies want to sell us their products. They're not going to tell you what's bad about it. They're going to tell you what's good about it. And doctors have to get you out of their office in 10 to 15 minutes or less. They don't have time to sit there and worry about what's going to happen to you. Write the script. See me in 30 days, pay my bill. That's not saying anything bad about doctors. It's the system. The system is geared for us to take medications. So be very, very careful. As an actor and alcoholic, if I need a medication, I will talk to my sponsor. I will get advice. I will tell my doctor what's up, and I will follow the directions. And I've had surgery where I had to be on opiates. It didn't bother me at all. I took him as medicine, then I let him go. I had another time when I had a car accident. I was on pills, and I was fiending on the last day because I had some left, but I didn't need them. And I had to throw them out immediately because my little brain was like, I could take all of them at once. I even made the mistake one time. This is so funny. Just side note, we were watching David Letterman. This is how old it was. And I had taken my medicine. I should have gone to bed, but I took it. There's a double dose at night. They said, take your pills when you go to sleep. It'll last through the whole night. And we were watching Letterman, so I took them before I went to bed, which I shouldn't have. And I was laughing a little too hard at David Letterman. And my buddy, the guy I was telling you about who played the drums, my best friend, he was in the chair and he was watching me. Because, you can't fool another addict. And he looked at me one time. He says, it's pretty funny, isn't it? And I was like, ah! I knew at that moment he saw it. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, man. I'm not meaning to trip out here. And he saw it. I was having the effects of the chemical. Not from David Letterman. Turns us into that other person, man. And that other person for me is a liar, a cheat, a thief. I don't care about you. I care about me and my pleasure. Last thing. Alcohol and drug use is masturbation. That's all it is. It's about my pleasure and what I want, what I feel. And if everybody else feels bad, I don't give a shit. It's about how I feel. And that's not how we try to be in sobriety. In sobriety, we try to be aware and more tolerant and patient about how other people feel. And it's not about me anymore. It's about everybody. So if that's any help, I hope it is. But be very careful. If you have any history, if you have any family history, you might be playing with fire over there. All right. Let's see here. Last question of the day. It says, hi there. It seems that some of my psychological issues stem from feeling less than or a pressure to be successful in my family system or in society's eyes. Welcome to manhood. We all got that as males. My question is, how can we break out of that feeling? Specifically, how can I also help guide my child towards having a good life and teaching them to work hard without putting too much pressure on them? Thanks for the help and keep up the great work on the program. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. So some of that might be pure alcoholic. Now, you didn't identify as an alcoholic, but I'm going to assume, since that's what we talk a lot about here, that alcoholic addict probably fits in your life somewhere. Even if you're an adult child, it's the same dynamic. We do feel less than. We do feel like we don't quite measure up. There's a good friend of ours named Don Majors. He's passed away. Tradition in recovery. You can tell a person's full name if they've passed away. I don't know why that makes a difference, but apparently that's the thing they tell you to do. You can find him all over YouTube. He's a brilliant speaker, great Southern drawl, amazing stories. Please listen to him. But he talks about in his story that he owned a multi-million-dollar law firm, and he was all over our news every night, litigating very high publicity, high dollar cases all the time. And he was standing there one morning and looking out at all of his employees that work for him. And this is his place. And he was feeling, I wonder when they're going to figure out that I don't know what I'm doing. I wonder when they're going to figure out the lie that I'm just an imposter. It's a sham. I don't really know what I'm doing and I don't deserve all this. That's normal for us. It's the committee in our brain. To challenge that, you've got to have a sponsor and you've got to be talking to them about those feelings. You're journaling about those feelings, doing deeper work and going to individual therapy on those feelings. But most of all, the number one tool for the cure for everything you're running down here is helping others. If you will get into service work and get busy helping other people, giving them ride to meetings, offering to help them with their grass cutting or whatever form that takes for you that you're comfortable with, ideally taking on a sponsee.
Do your work and
pass it on. Pass it on. Be a sponsor because that's the greatest journey to get out of self. We have got to get away from that committee. If I'm alone and listening to that stuff too long, I'll work myself into inertia that I can't do anything because I'm just consumed by anxiety and depression. That's normal for us. Even after all these years I've been sober. But if I will get involved with somebody else, I forget all about that. I forget about my self-doubt. I forget about my having to be somebody in my family's eyes or society, well, especially in my family's eyes. All those expectations we were raised with, and they program that you have to be this, have to make this much money, live in this zip code, all that crap. We laugh at that in recovery because none of it matters. We don't sit in the rooms and compare wallet size or any of that. We don't even care, right? I don't care what you do as long as you're happy. That's all that really matters to us. That's kind of makes it unique because I was taught by Bob Earl and these other speakers. God bless you, Bob Earl. Thanks for being a great teacher. That what's the first question a guy asks a question? What do you do? And why is he asking you that? So he can judge you and put you in a hierarchy. If you say you're a garbage collector, he's going to be like, yeah, nice talking to you. But if you say you work for the CIA, he's like, what? You do what? And he wants to talk to you. That's the bullshit of the matrix world. But you got to do this work to get out of the matrix, to challenge those messages. Besides, how well were those messages working for you while you were drinking? Did they make you really happy? Maybe you made a lot of money, maybe you had a big company, but did it make you a good father? Or did it make your kids love you? Or did it make the dog love you? Usually we were assholes when we were using. So it may not be a tool that you even like, but you got to challenge it because it's family programming. I can still feel that today, like I'm not doing enough. I know that sounds silly because I hear all these people around me saying, can you believe, even Catherine said the other day, she's like, even after everything he does at the treatment center and he's writing the books and he goes to meetings and helps these people and now he's going through this podcast, I still feel like sometimes I'm not doing enough. And that my damn family. You're not enough unless you're proving your worth. If this podcast is not a Joe Rogan level blockbuster podcast, somehow we're failing. It's a lie. It's an absolute lie. We do this for ourselves and to help others. I don't need approval. But boy, that seeking approval with men, when Burns Brady leaned forward and said that was his biggest demon one night in the men's meeting, seeking approval. I wanted that little pat on my head from my mama, tell me I was a good little boy, a good son. I want my daddy pat me on the ass and say, great job, you're a great ball player, whatever it is. That's a lack of self-value. That's a lack of self-security. I need to be working my tools. And I want to say one more time, second stage recovery, go to one-on-one therapy. And if this person knows me personally, which I think you probably do, I know of a man in this town who is the best therapist in the world. And I can send you to this person. So just let me know. You won't regret it. Freeing yourself from programming, man, and living on your own terms is better than anything else in this world. So, any thoughts on any of our questions this week, Dan, or any angles that I might have missed?
He did have another question about his children, I think, didn't he?
Let me see here. Probably. It's easy for me to miss.
Oh,
yeah. About what should I do with my child? You know what? You're a father. I'm going to let you address that first. He says, you want me to read it again?
Yeah.
Specifically, how can I help guide my child towards having a good life and teaching them how to work hard without putting too much pressure on them? Now, you have a son, so I don't. So Dan the man is on the spot.
I think the first thing is just words, actions mean more than words, right? So I know that's probably the first thing is to stay in the deal and continue to work a program and do stuff. And you're going to show him a person. The thing is like, in my world, I'd already shown my kids one person for such a long time that it's going to take some time to show them this other person. And, we say that thing I like to say, I don't see me that well. Well, they don't see change either, really, because it all looks temporary at first, so you're doing this for a little bit. So one, and this is obvious, is stay in the game, continue to improve yourself, keep on getting better and demonstrate what it looks like to be a healthy role model and working a healthy schedule. If you're gone all the time at work, that's not going to be good for a good role model look for your kid, even though you can convince yourself that you're working hard, right? And you're demonstrating hard work. I think there's a balance in there, and you would want to demonstrate that too, that you can also have a life and not just burn it, working. And I think another thing is what's everybody want? Everybody just wants to be loved, right? Mm-hmm. And some of that will come from support, right? Showing love is one thing, is to support your kids in what they're doing. Whatever they're doing, support them. Give them encouragement. Jordan Peterson talks about how little encouragement we give each other today. It's not enough. And realize that they have their own journey, that they're going to do their thing. And support that. Know that that's the thing. You can't make when this word powerless that we toss around here really came home to roost for me when I think about how powerless I am as far as raising my kids. You can keep them safe, keep them healthy, keep them fed, keep a roof over their shoulder and that kind of thing. But as far as deciding their path, I have to get out of the way and let them have their path. And I've had a lot of really good lessons in that department with both of my children of supporting them and get out of the way. But it's a tough thing to do.
You know what Marion used to say about that? She said that you don't own your kids and you're not really in charge of them. You're just their custodian.
Yep.
They're God's kid.
Yep.
And they have their own soul and they have their own blueprint and they have their own journey. And you getting in the way of that and trying to put your expectations and your journey on their journey is kind of a violation of divine order.
Yeah.
And you'll cause that person to be messed up.
Yep.
Because our expectations as parents, like I see what I see a lot in my groups, is, well, I wasn't the baseball star, but I'm going to make my son the baseball star. Or I didn't achieve this, but he has to achieve this. Look what happened to Tiger Woods, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Yes, he made a lot of money, but that man is a disturbed young little kid is pretty messed up inside. Poor guy.
Yeah.
And he's in the spotlight, has to have all his stuff aired out there. But yeah, isn't that hard to accept that they're an individual and they have their own path, and trying to honor that and be supportive while also guiding them and saying, there's value in hard work. One thing I think that would have helped me a lot is with being not less entitled and spoiled. I think my parents should have made me get a job when I was in school. I wouldn't have wanted to, and I would have fought them every bit of it.
Yep.
But boy, it would have really prepared me more for life to just get a little part-time job at the record store or something and see what that was all about.
Yeah. Well, that whatever that dynamic is like, rich kids who have rich parents end up not, they're underachievers, right? And the ones that come from poor, medium kind of class, those are the ones that really push to do more,
We had summer jobs, but during the school, they considered school your job. Plus, I was acting and doing all these extracurriculars, so there wasn't much time. But I think I needed that discipline I would have been more confident when I first went out for my first job if I had done it before.
Yeah.
After school, right?
Yep. But that's a big question, and one that everybody has. What's the best way to raise these children? And to be honest, there's a whole wave of kids coming through that haven't been given what they needed to succeed. I think we're going to see that wave kind of happen of. Well, I'll just quote my old Mark, the guy from the soft white underbelly. He says, we have a lot of problems. Looks like homeless, looks like addiction, looks like this, looks like that. He said, I think what we got a problem with is shitty parenting.
I agree. When you put your expectations on your child, you're communicating disappointment when they're not that person.
Yeah.
Even when you don't intend to. So that child is not feeling loved and supported. He's feeling like he's less than, or not making dad proud of him. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to make your child feel disappointment. It's unintentional, certainly. But I would say, have you ever just sat down with your kid and let him talk?
Yeah, there you go.
And just said, what do you like to do?
Yep.
And I said, it's okay. Didn't talk to me. If you want to play a video game, tell me about it. Teach me about this game. What do you like about it? Show some interest. Instead of coming at, you need to get off the couch and stop playing that video game. I mean, I tell you, if I ever had a kid, and I'd be a great dad, I know I would. Many of my partners have said, so you'd be a great dad, but I don't know. I can still have him until I'm 80, so who knows, or 90. But if I just, had a kid, I'd be like, encouragement, praise, and support, which I never got. And I really do feel that affected my dreams and my achievements, that if I had had just that ground level, knowing that no matter what I do, Dad's always there for me. There's always a safe place to go. And I don't have to worry about finances if I take a risk, because I'm not going to fall to the bottom. That was not so with an alcoholic family system. They tried. My mom tried the best she could, but it's limited. They can't do that. Trying to survival. Each person's just trying to survive. So that alone will make your child thrive in this world, to know that base. And you've done that with your kids. You told them that, hey, no matter what happens, you can come talk to me, right?
Yep.
And I won't judge you and beat you up if you need a car ride home from the party because everybody else is using drugs and you don't want to get in a drunk driving crash. I want you to call me.
Yep. And, and you're not going to get in trouble for coming and telling me the truth. I am not going to. If you got drunk last night, you can tell me that. I am not going to come down on you about it. Just being, I heard this one tip from somebody at one point that said, if my kids, if they text me the letter X and send me where they're at, I will come get them, no questions asked. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to get into anything. On a couple of those other questions, I kind of giggled at we're talking about the spending thing and how this thing, that's another switch, right? Like, okay, I'm not going to drink, but I'm only going to smoke pot. And we just dig down in there because nature abhors a vacuum, right? When I pull something out of my life, I'm going to try and refill it with something else. And that's really one of the tricks here in recovery is what to refill it with, to fill that void that the alcohol and drugs have left you with something healthy. You can't just quit and not pick something else back up to kind of fill that void, and spending and buying stuff. And that's one of the things, when before in my using, my name's Dan and I'm a gun addict. I bought guns like crazy. I put myself on moratorium because when I got my rights back, I went a little crazy and I bought some stuff and overspent a little bit. And I've had to say, no, I am not buying another gun this year. I don't know how much longer than that, but I'm not going to buy another gun in 2024, and set my own personal boundaries with myself. It's easy enough to fall into. And I agree too, the nap meditation thing, those two things went right together, right? I take better naps because I had I honestly don't truly meditate much anymore. I do some sitting quietly and I take my naps, which I consider the same thing. But in early recovery, I had to train myself to meditate. You're no good at sitting. I was no good at sitting still.
Yeah, sit still.
And that mind racing stuff and all that comes with it, especially you just got sober and you're feeling like you feel when you're in early recovery. I had to practice meditation in order to get back some kind of level mind frame. And that also helped me today. I've said this a bunch, is that my meditation practice has helped me sleep. It's another thing people have trouble with in early recovery is sleeping. Learning to meditate, giving me a switch where I can turn myself off today. I don't mess around taking a nap. I'm not spending, if I got a half hour, I'll get a 27-minute nap because I'll be asleep in 3 minutes. I astonish the guys when they come down to the cabin for fifth steps. And I've given them the instructions for 6 and 7. I said, don't worry about it. I'm going to be upstairs and I will be asleep in 37 seconds. And then the next morning they'll go, dang, you wasn't kidding, because they'll hear my breath change. And I'm going to put earplugs in, so I'm not going to hear. You're welcome to talk out loud and everything. And I'm going to be asleep in just a minute. And to the person who was talking about and this is, again, we have no business, like you said, it's a self-diagnosis thing. You have to thine own self be true kind of thing.
Because nothing else works. Every doctor in the world can tell you have this, and if you don't believe it, it won't change anything. You have to come to your own truth.
Yeah. And there's, we say, if you found yourself in an AA meeting, that wasn't an accident, right? you didn't,
normal people are rarely finding themselves in it.
Right.
And normal people, by the way, never question whether they're an addict or not.
Yeah. Well, then that's exactly where I was going. The fact that the person asked the question, that might be the answer in itself, because you're probably not going to ask that question if inside you're not wondering about that. And as you said when you answered the question, if you're sitting there thinking about if you think you have a problem, which has got you to send an email to somebody asking that question, that could be the answer in itself.
Well, they didn't put in the one part they should have put, I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah, there you go. Asking for a friend. Right.
But, to be honest with you, Dan, the real meat and potatoes is just quit. Just quit and see how you do.
Yep.
We just don't realize with everything in our society how hooked we are on something.
Aren't you supposed to be a little bit more careful if you're taking Xanax on a regular basis and you just stop?
Well, yes, that's whole wrinkle as well, of course. But you let me explain it, okay?
Well, no, but I want to make sure we're being clear about that, to not tell somebody just to drop their Xanax. They should be in contact with their doctor and follow doctor's directions in getting off of that.
Touche. Okay, so benzodiazepines and alcohol are depressants, and they have a very strange rebound effect on the body when you withdraw entire use all at once. They not only can cause seizures, which is problematic in itself and could possibly cause you permanent damage. When you have a seizure, you're actually seizing up, and I would see people do that in the treatment center when I worked in inpatient, and they're not breathing. And while you're not breathing, you're not getting oxygen to your brain, and brain cells are dying. So that's why the paramedics, when you come out, they're doing that, and they're saying, who's the president? What day is it? They want to know how long you've been out to see if there's any permanent brain damage. But what's even scarier than that is your entire metabolic system can just shut down at a random moment's notice. Sometimes maybe you might feel a little lightheaded first and get a little faintish and go out like that, but you can die instantly. It's a very strange, because, depressants, they put you down. So if you take them back, you think you'd be up. For some reason, everything just bottoms out all of a sudden. Now, I was watching Dr. Drew's Celebrity Rehab, and there's a woman who's a B celebrity, whatever, C celebrity even. She's just sitting there and she's talking, and then she just starts going, and everybody's like, whoa, 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 whoa. And all the professionals came in and said she was on benzodiazepines and she's dying. Call the ambulance. You will just stop breathing. You will literally just shut down and die. So you need to do that in a clinical medical setting. And if that alone doesn't tell you how dangerous Xanax is, and if you have a doctor that's just handing it out like water or Ativan or Klonopin or any variation of that, that's something you should be really cautious about. Something that could kill me when it was withdrawn from my body. Then what's that telling you about being hooked? So I'm glad you made that point, Dan. That's a very important caveat. I'm going to guess from this description, though, it's more of a concoction of several chemicals. And, try putting down one and see if it increases your use of the other. That's my story. If I'm going to put down one, I'm just going to use more of the other. Get same effect.
Yeah. And with those two, you're taking it is an amphetamine to get going in the day. And then at nighttime, you're taking depressant to stop that going. That's walking dangerous tightrope.
But it's the American way.
Man. Yeah, it is.
Let me get my caffeine and nicotine in the morning. Let me take my downers at night and my alcohol, go to sleep. Let me do this and that on the weekends.
Yep. I'll just, I question myself sometimes. I'm definitely a caffeine, nicotine addict, and I do that. And then I go lay down in bed and I take, what's the sleep stuff? Melatonin. And I know I get that, but here I'm still kind of wrapped up in that cycle that makes me think about, like, hold on, that's what I'm doing. I'm taking a stimulant in the morning and some sort of depressant to get to sleep at night. Now I don't actually take melatonin very often, but I have some because sometimes I need to shut down, and that helps me do that.
So let's end on that, because that's a great point. There is a huge difference that the person who was smoking pot or wondering about pot in the last episode was talking about. Is it addictive, And so we've got this psychological addictive thing. And if you take Tylenol or Advil before you go to bed long enough, your brain will associate that with going to bed. So the day you don't take the Tylenol, suddenly it's going to be a little harder to fall asleep. That is a psychological addiction. A physical addiction is where you actually have withdrawal effects physically. And that is what we're seeing with the new pot. My patients will explain. If I don't smoke a bowl before going to work, I don't feel like my stomach is settled. I'll feel uneasy in my stomach. Or I don't have any motivation to get up and go to work. Or I'm a little just unstable and not enthusiastic. I'm depressed. And I'm like, well, shit, you're telling me you have to smoke a bowl before work? What's the difference between that and a guy has to rig up and shoot heroin to go to work? That's the new pot. It is actually physically hooking people. Now, we're slow to wake up to this. So stay tuned to your local news station. You're going to find all these effects coming out. The more we make it accessible, greater accessibility always increases greater addiction potential among the population, because there's going to be a few people who do follow the law and don't try it and they won't know they're addicts and alcoholics till they try it, and suddenly they're a smoke fiend, and grandma's all high all the time and not playing with the kids. But yeah, just be careful, everybody out there. We used a phrase in the 60s, better living through chemicals. And it was kind of used about plastics and all the stuff DuPont Corporation and shit was putting in the soldiers' uniforms and in our food supply, which they still are. And now we've just taken it to a level where we've all got plastic in our system, and from the rain and from the oceans and consuming fish. Oh, Lord, there's a better way. And that's through honesty. That's my final summation. Self-honesty, self-honesty, self-honesty is the first step. Can you be brutally honest? Look yourself in the mirror and call what you see.
Yeah. And
if you can't, ask your loved one to come stand here and tell you what they see, if you're brave enough to do that. Mom, when you do that, or Dad, when you're drinking, you do get a little bit testy. Or you're sometimes unresponsive when I'm asking you about the show and you're asleep and you're not watching the show with me. Your kids are getting hurt by that. Yeah. And you'll convince yourself that you're fine. It's insane. So, another good episode
Yep.
with lots of stuff.
Good deal.
We don't want to put too much into each episode because we'll have nothing left to talk about down the road, but we'll figure it out as we go along. Stay tuned. I think the next episodes, I'm already thinking ahead, will probably be about the food addiction and our food supply being poisoned. Stay tuned for that one. And then after that, I want to do the meditation one since it came up today. We'll talk all about meditation and techniques that work for people. So, as always, send us your questions. im12recovery.org. Recovery.com. We're working on the webpage. So right now, im12recovery@gmail.com. Took me 3 times only. gmail.com, everybody, and we'll answer your questions. Thank you for being with us. Stay on this journey, not to bug you, but just to ask you one time in the podcast. Please press like, comment, and subscribe. And we're trying to get this message out there to more people. And the only way we can do that is not drown in obscurity. We have to get enough viewers to get us there. So please help us with that. It's service work. All right, let's close in our usual fashion with the serenity prayer, shall we? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Just for today. Keep coming back. It works if you work it, and you die if you don't. Woo-hoo! If they start doing that all over the country, I'll consider it a personal success. Just have fun in your recovery, guys. That's why we do that stuff. Have a great time, and we'll see you next time.